¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos?
Hola a todos, bienvenido otra vez. Welcome to CHIRLA TV. My name is Diana Escamilla, and I want to remind us all that California was not always so pro-immigrant as it is today. There was a moment in time where it was super anti-immigrant, but we've come a long way, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. There was one proposition, specifically Prop 187, that really highlighted how against California was towards immigrants. But today, we're celebrating that we actually overcame, but we're still in the movement. And joining us today is Angelica Salas, Executive Director of CHIRLA. Angelica, can you please explain what Prop 187 was?
Sure. So in the state of California, you can actually collect signatures and try to put forward a proposition so that voters actually vote on it. So there was a group of individuals here in the state of California who decided to form an organization called Save Our State. And their belief was that they needed to save the state of California from immigrants, especially undocumented immigrants. So they went out and they raised money to collect all these signatures. And they qualified that ballot initiative to go before the voters. So Proposition 187 was a ballot initiative that basically said that immigrants who were undocumented, children could not go to school. So they couldn't go to school from obviously Head Start all the way to high school. So they were denied access to high school, to school, up to high school. It also asked that any government official report anybody who was undocumented. And so it was very punitive. And additionally, it basically, organizations like CHIRLA would also have to report people who were undocumented. And it created penalties, and it was just awful, especially because it targeted our little children, right, who couldn't go to school because they were undocumented. So the proposition went forward in 1994, and it was voted on Election Day. And unfortunately, what ended up happening right before the election was that the person who was running for governor to be reelected, Governor Pete Wilson, right, used Proposition 187 to fuel his campaign. And so he started putting a bunch of ads out in the on television saying, you know, I'm for Proposition 187, so he even gave it more power. At the end, the proposition was passed by the voters. At 53% of the voters actually voted in favor. And so it was really a horrible time in California because right after it passed, people said, what am I going to do? Am I going to take my children to school? Can I no longer go to clinics? And it was a very awful moment here in the state of California.
But it was thanks to organizations like CHIRLA and other coalitions that they were able to file some lawsuits against it, deem it unconstitutional, and thankfully it didn't go into effect full force.
Well, actually, yes. Immediately there was our lawyers, MALDEF, ACLU, others went to court to stop Proposition 187, and they were able to hold an injunction on it. Okay. However, the spirit of Proposition 187 lived on because many of the elected officials, or special members of Congress, took it on to the national level. And so while we were able to stop it here in California, the spirit of Proposition 187 went into the immigration law that was passed in 1996, in addition to Welfare Reform Act. And so a lot of those pieces moved forward. But the piece that did not move forward was not allowing children to go to school.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that. So we'll be right back, folks, to continue educating ourselves on what Prop 187 left behind.
We're here at CHIRLA TV discussing Prop 187 and its impact in our communities. Right here with Angelica Salas, Executive Director at CHIRLA. And so you were mentioning earlier that Prop 187 passed because the majority of the voters voted for it. And we know the majority of the voters were white, and not that many Latino voters were showing up. Have we seen a change now with Prop 187? It's a great scare for voters, but now we're seeing more Latino voters in the polls. Are we doing something to bring people to vote?
Definitely. I think that was a wake-up call to many immigrant rights organizations, to unions, as well as to civil rights organizations, that we needed to pair up our advocacy with actual electoral power and building electoral power. So beginning after Proposition 187 passed, there was an intentional investment in first making sure that everybody who was a legal permanent resident in the state of California had access to resources to become a citizen of the United States. So that was the first thing that happened. Those individuals then became citizens and registered to vote. But then there were voter registration drives that were carried on throughout the state of California by organizations like CHIRLA. We'd go to the naturalization ceremonies right after people would be sworn as made their oath of citizenship. We would register them to vote, and everybody has done that. And right now, for example, CHIRLA is part of a program called the Million Voter Project, which is about collecting the power of 1 million voters in the state of California to sustain California as a progressive state. And CHIRLA by itself has actually been able to help get out to vote 250,000 people. And so we didn't have a voter program in the when Proposition 187 passed. We started building it, but we also started doing a lot of organizing, and this is what's so important. CHIRLA also decided that we were going to organize our community because we couldn't just be victims. We needed to be agents of change. So we were one of the first organizations to organize immigrant undocumented workers. We opened up the day labor centers here in California. We're the first in its nation. We started some of the first domestic worker organizing, and I'm so proud of the work that we did in the late 90s to also start immigrant youth organizing. Again, some of the first organizing in the country, because we felt the power is in our people, and so how do we organize them to be part of change? And so even if they can't vote because they're undocumented, they can also participate in civic engagement. And while we were able to stop here in California, like I said earlier, Proposition 187 in the courts, that spirit carried on into the federal level. And so our laws at the federal level have changed, and they have to be reformed. But the organizing and the electoral power has actually getting us closer to that change we want to see.
So a lot of the things that we mentioned, some of the implications that Prop 187 brought, we see it now nationwide. But we know that California was their ones, and now California has been able to move forward. And we still continue to struggle, but we continue to fight. What would be some advice that you give to folks outside of California that see themselves in the situation that California used to be at?
Well, I think that it's so important to continue to organize at the municipal level. So if you have an opportunity to change things at the very local level, do so, because those elected officials who are elected to city council, to school board, eventually maybe those are your same candidates that are going to run at the state level later because they've gotten that experience. So we will have later our state senator Maria Elena Durazo in this segment, and what she demonstrates is somebody who was in organized labor who then decided to run. So it's really important for us to begin locally. So I know that there's many states that feel very difficult right now, but don't give up. It's so important. We turned our state around because we didn't give up. We kept fighting. I also think at the national level, we can't give up. We have a president who's anti-immigrant, but we also believe that a lot of people have awoken to the fact that they are needed in the fight for social change and justice, and not just for immigrants, but for the entire nation. So I believe that if immigrants succeed, the entire nation succeeds.
Mm-hmm.
So lastly, any vision for 2020?
Of course, the vision is power of our people. It means that we need to make sure that across this country, we're registering people to vote. Right. And it's so important that that happen. There are many, many young people, especially under 30 years of age, who sometimes feel that they're not necessary in this political process. And so my hope and my vision is that all our young people, 30 and under, are registering to vote and getting out to vote. 2020 is also the year where we are counted for America. That means that everybody in their household is going to receive a census questionnaire. It's first going to be online. So we ask you, as soon as you get that notification online, fill out that census.
Right.
Make it happen right away. Make sure that the baby in the family gets counted, that grandpa in the family gets counted, everybody gets counted.
We'll be right back with Senator Maria Elena Durazo.
¿Quiénes somos?
Welcome back to CHIRLA TV. We're here with California State Senator Maria Elena Durazo and Angelica Salas, Executive Director of CHIRLA, talking about Prop 187. So I wanted to ask you, how did it impact your careers? Because I understand that it fueled your want to be part of social justice. So for you, Senator, how did it impact your career?
Well, one thing, it made clear that immigrant workers needed a union. And so as president of the Hotel and Food Service Workers Union, where we had just kicked out some very racist leaders, we were moving forward in that direction. And so Prop 187 made it crystal clear that immigrant workers were under attack, severe attack, them and their families. There was no respect for their hard work, for the economy, how they're contributing. This has always been the Southwest has always been the land of Mexicans and Latinos. And so here these were horrible racist attacks. We knew that only through collective work, through organizing, and especially workers in low-wage industries, that they really needed a union. So it strengthened our resolve. It made me feel like we've got to put more into it, and these workers are ready. We had been told for many, many years, oh, they're afraid, they're low-wage workers, and that was dead. We were pushing that whole idea out the window and moving forward, saying they're ready to organize, they're ready to fight back, and Prop 187 just strengthened that resolve and made it much more stronger.
That's quite powerful. And I know that CHIRLA at the time was 8 years old, barely 8 years old. So how did it evolve? How did CHIRLA grow from this? What did CHIRLA do?
CHIRLA, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights at that time of Los Angeles, was really an epicenter of a place where immigrants went to ask about what was going to happen to their lives and that of their children. I started as a volunteer right after the passage of Prop 187 at CHIRLA, and so I was listening to the hotline where people were calling because they were being discriminated in the workplace, just in public spaces, and CHIRLA released a report that was called Hate Unleashed, the aftermath of Proposition 187. So a lot of the people that I talked to were people who actually were third, fourth, fifth generation U.S. citizens who were being denied access to banks and to restaurants. It was a very ugly time in California. For me, as an individual, I was volunteering because I had taken a deferment from my master's going on continuing on my master's, and it made me decide to stay at CHIRLA. It made me really say, this is where I need to be right now. This is a moment in my community's lifetime that I need to be here. And so I saw in a lot of the people who came to CHIRLA or who I talked to on the phone, my parents, people who had struggled all their lives to contribute and to just give their everything to their families and certainly to the country. And so it made me really want to stay. And I've been there, I thought I was only going to be there for a year, and I've been now there for 24 years. So it made me stay. But then the other thing that was really important was I met people like Maria Elena Durazo, our senator, who at that time, was organizing. And so it was really a very intentional, collective push to build power in our community, because we said, okay, the only way we're going to defeat these racist politicians, the only way we're going to defeat all these racist policies is if we organize and we build the political power. And so, I remember going to the Local 11, meeting Miguel Contreras and many other labor leaders who basically said, okay, how are we going to register people to vote? How are we going to make sure we push people to become citizens? That's when my mother became a citizen citizen. She had been undocumented, then she was a legal permanent resident, and then that was when she became a U.S. citizen, and then has never stopped voting. And the same thing with all my aunts, and all of us just felt like that was what we needed to do. So I think it was an amazing moment, and I think where we are today in California is a result of a lot of intentional work.
I really want to hear a little bit more about what was the background politically back and how it is now and how we can compare.
Well, let me
both.
just say, remember that just a few years earlier, we had won, after many years of struggle, we won amnesty for 2 million undocumented. And so this was the ripening of the time to go through that process. It was a 5-year process. Then you become eligible to become the process of becoming a citizen. So this was very much exactly around the time when many of those people who had been undocumented just a few years before were now becoming eligible to go through the legalization process. That really pushed our communities forward. It pushed forward the opportunities. And in the union movement, we had a collective of leaders that had come out of social justice, the farm workers movement, other movements, and the Chicano movement, the student movement, and said, you know, we are at a very perfect place now. If we move forward, not only do we change and transform people's individual lives and help them become citizens and vote, but we also will have such power if we look at it all together. The citizenship, becoming a union member, fighting in the workplace. That's when the home care workers campaign started. That's when the hotel workers started. Later, the janitors started, the domestic workers. These were all working people who said together, we can push forward to raise our wages. We were the first major city in the whole country to pass a living wage law. In the city, citywide. So it just became more and more evident that our whole community had to fight for not only our political voices, but our workplace voices, our economic voices. All of that together strengthened our community. And for me, you know, to see from the rally, the march that took place, against Prop 187, and I see families out there, see immigrant families, tens of thousands and thousands, was quite personally inspiring. And all I could do was picture more of those, which is what happened until today. The May Day that CHIRLA and Labor and others started, you know, just grew and grew and grew. And then it became a natural to hit the streets. Hoy marchamos, mañana votamos. It just became part and parcel.
Do you see that happening, that we could push for what we are doing here in California in other states?
I'm very proud of the work that we have done here from California to really push forward a movement for immigrant rights. In California, we said we need not to be in this very vulnerable place, so we need to push for legalization and for immigration reform, because ultimately people need to have full immigration status and citizenship, full citizenship, so that they can exercise their rights everywhere. At the same time, as we're fighting for that at a national level, we're fighting for local policies and state policies that actually allow for our community to thrive despite the fact that we are not yet there with legal status. Pushing for our young people to be able to have access to higher education, for workers to have increases in their wages and protections. We've moved and advanced a lot on criminal justice reform, a lot which actually support our immigrant families. And so we believe that if we do the same across the country, intentionally build power, intentionally build coalition, which is the other thing we did here in California, that we can actually change this country and change it for the better, not just for immigrants, but for everybody else.
Of course.
Thank you so much. With that, we'll be right back after these short commercials.
¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos?
Thank you once again for joining us. So we're almost done with our time here, but we want to remind folks that we're celebrating 25 years past Prop 187. So thank you so much for the fight that you've done and that you continue to do. But tell us, what are some of the actions that are going to be happening to remember what the struggle was, what continues to be, and how we continue to grow?
Well, on Saturday, November 9th, we are celebrating the struggle. Celebrating the struggle that we have to continue on. This is not about, oh, look what happened 25 years ago. This is about today. And so we need to have thousands of people show up, to commit to doing a lot of things moving forward. We still don't have Medi-Cal or any kind of health insurance for undocumented, majority of undocumented. So we have many things to move forward for. The census coming up, that we want everybody to show up and learn how to do that so that we can tell our families not to be afraid. It's always giving comfort to our families and in the struggle, but not babying our communities. They're not babies. They're, hardworking, courageous men and women and families. So let's use that strength, move forward. We're going to celebrate on Saturday, November 9th at the State Historic Park near Chinatown downtown. And let's be there between 11:30 and 1 and celebrate everything, all the good things.
And actually, we have the fight continues. So right after Proposition 187, the commemoration and really reflecting and committing to move forward for immigrant rights, on November 12th, we're going to have major rallies here in Los Angeles and also in Washington, D.C. To fight for DACA in the Supreme Court. So it just really connects with, we move in a commemoration, but we move right into action. And then we're going to continue to fight to make California the best state for all who live in this state. And almost 50% of the population of the state of California is an immigrant or a child of an immigrant. So we know that if immigrants thrive, we all thrive.
And it really sounds like there's more than one way to really celebrate and acknowledge what we've done in the movement. Asking folks, if you are part of a union, that's something to celebrate, right? If you have the opportunity to join a union, if you make yourself count for the census, that's you celebrating your right to be an individual here in California, especially as an immigrant. So thank you so much for both of the activities that you both have done. And
we'll be there. Thank you so much for being in the show, Senator Durazo. We really appreciate you here your second time. Angelica as well. Thank you so much for being here in the show. We're very happy to be commemorating what we have done in the past 25 years, but the fight continues. We're not done. And we'll see you next week here in CHIRLA TV.
Sí se puede.
Sí se puede.
¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos?